OTAs just started, and Xavier Thomas, the rookie nobody wanted, just left Tyreek Stevenson in the dust in front of Caleb Williams and the Bears' first-team offense. Impressive, but in a minute, I am going to tell you exactly why. That might be the biggest problem for this team in 2026. Luther Burden III is playing at a level that Ben Johnson, a coach who does not hype anybody in May, described this week as, "I am buying stock." Year 2, different guy entirely. But there is a reason his regular season numbers might not show how good he actually is, and you need to understand that before training camp kicks off. And ESPN just dropped Cole Kmet's name in a trade simulation this week. Veteran, key piece, out of Chicago. Ryan Poles has a decision sitting on his desk that the Windy City never saw coming, and it reshapes this entire roster if it happens. Bear down. All right, let's start with some real honesty here, because I think this conversation deserves it. When the Bears used their third-round pick, selection number 89 in the 2026 draft, on Xavier Thomas, wide receiver out of LSU, the fan reaction was divided at best. And I want to be fair to that reaction because it was completely legitimate. The Bears had real needs. The offensive line always generates conversation. There are edge rusher positions where this team can still get better. And in a fourth receiver from LSU with a return specialist profile, a lot of fans saw a luxury this team couldn't afford in the third round. I had my own doubts. Keep it a buck. When I saw that pick, I genuinely thought Poles was being too offense-heavy in a draft where real value was available at other positions. I thought that. I'm putting it on the record. But here's the problem with that criticism, and I'm willing to admit it. Ben Johnson saw something very specific in Xavier Thomas that is clearly not easy to find in this market. The head coach said it himself when they drafted him. It's an ability that doesn't grow on trees. And when a coach of Johnson's caliber uses that specific phrase, you have to stop and ask exactly what ability he's talking about. The answer is 4.28 seconds in the 40-yard dash. But that alone explains nothing, because the NFL is full of fast guys who never translate that speed into real on-field production. The difference between a fast receiver and a dangerous receiver is the ability to use that speed within the structure of a play. And that's where Thomas is starting to separate himself from the conversation. On the very first Thursday of OTAs, Thomas was not working with the rookie group. He was not with the practice squad guys. He was on the main field with the first-team offense, catching passes from Caleb Williams. And bro, what happened out there was not a minor detail that beat reporters just casually mentioned in passing. It was the play of the day. Thomas ran a route down the sideline, what appears to have been a fade variation or an adjusted 9 route, and he absolutely dusted Tyreek Stevenson, 4 years in the league, a cornerback with professional experience. Stevenson didn't play that route poorly in isolation. It's that there was no way he could have won it. Thomas put him on skates, caught the ball from Caleb over his shoulder, and the coaches on the sideline were watching exactly what they needed to see. Now, here's something I want to say that I don't think enough people are saying. Tyreek Stevenson is exactly the kind of cornerback who should be able to handle a standard fade route. He's an athlete. He's not a 7th-round corner fighting for his career. The fact that Thomas made him look like that in May, in OTAs where receivers historically have an advantage over defenses, is promising, but we have to put it in context. May is not October. Nobody knows yet how Thomas is going to react when a linebacker jams him at the line of scrimmage or when an elite corner plays press coverage on him on a 3rd and 9 at Soldier Field. But here is what we already know. And what is completely independent of the competition level in OTAs, Thomas is learning fast, and that is what actually matters right now. Press Taylor, the offensive coordinator, said just a few weeks ago something that sounded like a reasonable warning. He's going to have to earn it. That starts in the meeting room. Earning some trust to get your reps, showing that you can be trusted when you get there, and then being able to do something with it. Taylor was clear. Nobody was going to hand Thomas anything because of his speed. The process was going to be the same for him as for any other rookie. And in his first OTA with the first-team offense, Thomas is already making highlight plays. That doesn't mean Taylor was wrong. It means Thomas came in prepared. There is a massive difference between a rookie who shows up to OTAs knowing he needs to impress, and a rookie who shows up having studied the playbook, having understood the route responsibilities within Johnson's system, and being ready to execute the moment his opportunity arrives. Thomas clearly arrived in the second group. Luther Burden saw it from the sideline and was straight with reporters. He's an electric player. He had a great fade ball today. He's going to be a great player for us and make big plays for us this year. It's going to be exciting to watch. And I want to stop here because this matters beyond the quote itself. Burden is the number 2 receiver on this team. He is competing for targets. He is competing for snaps. And he is publicly praising a rookie who just showed up to take opportunities away from him. That says something about the culture of this locker room. And it also says something about Thomas's level, because Luther Burden is not the guy who compliments people out of politeness. Now let's talk about what this actually means tactically for the Bears offense, because this is where the story gets really interesting. Ben Johnson has built his offensive philosophy around a fundamental principle: create simultaneous horizontal and vertical space so the quarterback never has to make a difficult decision. Spacing is everything in his system. When routes are designed correctly and receivers execute with precise timing, the quarterback has clean reads, clean throws, and the ball comes out of his hand in 2 or 3 steps. But there's one ingredient that makes all of that system exponentially more dangerous: a real vertical threat that the defense has to respect on every single snap. And here's something I think is critically important to understand. The 2025 Bears had moments where defenses could play too high coverage against Caleb Williams without paying an enormous price, because this team didn't have a receiver who could consistently win on vertical routes in pure man coverage. Rome Odunze can make deep plays, Burden has speed. But neither of them carries the profile of this guy beats you on a go route in straight man coverage that forces defensive coordinators to change their base coverage structure. Xavier Thomas carries that profile, when a safety has to respect Thomas on every snap, when he has to honor the possibility that Thomas is simply going to run past any coverage if the cornerback takes a wrong step. That opens the slot. That opens the seam for Colston Loveland. That opens the flat for DeAndre Swift. That opens crossing routes for Burden. Thomas doesn't need to be the number 1 receiver on this team to change how defenses play the Bears. He just needs to be credible as a deep threat. And in his first OTA with the first team offense, he's already being credible. Johnson summed it up with one line that I'm saving for when training camp arrives. We all have a vision for how this guy could really help us. That is not what a coach says about a return specialist. That is what a coach says about someone who has a real offensive role in his plans. And if that vision includes Thomas aligned wide, forcing safeties to respect the deep ball while Loveland and Burden work the underneath, that offense becomes something that NFC North defenses are going to lose sleep trying to scheme against. My direct opinion, I still don't know if Thomas is going to be the 3rd round pick these Bears needed. It's May. One OTA does not define a career. But what I saw this week tells me that Ben Johnson knew exactly what he was doing when he made that call on draft day. The biggest risk right now is not that Thomas turns out to be mediocre. The biggest risk is that this team has so many weapons that Thomas doesn't get enough snaps to develop in year 1. That is the problem I want to see how Johnson manages when preseason games arrive. Okay, but before we completely fall down the Thomas rabbit hole, there is another receiver in this building who is doing something perhaps more important and more quietly impactful. Luther Burden III is converting off-season work into visible on-field production, and Ben Johnson is not hiding it. The line Johnson used in front of reporters this week was direct. No ambiguity, no hedge. I'm buying Luther Burden stock right now. Listen to me. When an NFL head coach, a coach who by nature tends to be careful with public praise because he doesn't want to create expectations that become pressure, comes out in front of the media and uses that specific phrase in May, that is not empty hype. That is a deliberate signal. Johnson knows what he's saying. He's telling the fan base, he's telling the opposing defensive coordinators in the NFC North, and he's telling Burden himself, this guy is at a different level now. Let's revisit Burden's year 1 numbers because I think a lot of fans underestimate them given the context in which they were produced. Burden arrived at rookie minicamp in 2025, suffered an injury, and missed basically the entire preseason. He didn't get the adjustment period that most rookies receive. He arrived at training camp already behind the development curve, and he still finished the regular season with 652 yards on 47 receptions out of 60 targets, 2 touchdowns, and added 6 more receptions in the postseason. Those numbers are respectable for any rookie receiver. For a rookie receiver who arrived injured without a preseason ramp-up, they are genuinely impressive. But what Johnson is describing now in the 2026 offseason is something qualitatively different from simply healthier or more comfortable. He's talking about a jump in football understanding that fundamentally changes the type of player Burden can be. Johnson explained it with real technical precision. When we drafted him, we saw an explosive athlete who was really dangerous with the ball in his hands. The question was, how can we get it in his hands? The easy things to do are screens or short throws. But I think there's a lot more to his game that we've worked to unlock. That is extremely revealing. Johnson is admitting that in year 1, the team relied on the easy things with Burden because the learning curve didn't allow going deeper. Screens, short throws, plays where the receiver's work after the catch was more important than the work before it. That is perfectly reasonable for a rookie in his first season, but it's also a limitation. You cannot use a 4-4 receiver in all of his capabilities if that receiver is still processing coverages while he's running routes. What he's describing for year 2 is the next level. A Burden who executes full route tree concepts with the same confidence he executed screens last year. Speed cuts that become sharp breaks, line releases that create advantages before the pass leaves the quarterback's hand, and the most important piece of all, a receiver who is playing, not thinking. Johnson said it plainly. He looks like he's playing at a different speed right now, and you knew he had it in him. He's a 4.4 guy. But those timed speeds don't always translate to real speed, football speed, on the game tape, and I think we're starting to see that now. He's playing, he's not thinking as much. Man, that is the holy grail of receiver development in the NFL. When the game slows down in your mind, that's when your physical speed finally shows up completely on the field, because before that moment, part of your mental processor is occupied with route responsibility, coverage ID, corner leverage, timing with the quarterback. All of that processing, even unconsciously, steals fractions of a second from your reaction speed. When it becomes automatic, when all of it is instinct rather than active thought, suddenly a 4.4 receiver starts looking like a 4.3 receiver on tape. And there's something technical I want to highlight here because I don't think it's getting enough attention, the specific route tree work that Antoine Randall and Isaiah Ford have been doing with Burden. Randall is a former NFL receiver. He knows what it means to execute precision routes. And Ford, who had a long career as a third and fourth string receiver in this league precisely because of his technique and reliability, understands better than almost anyone how the details and releases and cuts separate a receiver who gets targets from one who stays on the bench. The fact that Johnson specifically mentions these two coaches as factors in Burden's development tells me there is systematic, deliberate work behind these results. This is not Burden simply maturing. This is a well-executed receiver development program delivering exactly what it promised. Johnson also mentioned something that struck me for its level of detail. He ran a route yesterday that was the first time he'd ever run that route, and he ran it as well as anyone I've been around. A route he had never run before, and he executed it perfectly. That tells me Burden's understanding of spacing, of timing, or of how his body needs to operate in relation to a defense, all of it is already internalized at a level where he can apply it to brand new routes immediately. That is a real developmental leap. That is not just he's been in the building longer. Now I have to be honest with my own opinion here because I think there is a conversation the Bears fan base needs to have. The question of how high Burden's ceiling is in this specific system. My position is that Burden has the athletic ability to be a Pro Bowl receiver in the NFL, but his ceiling in Chicago depends on a variable the coaches cannot fully control, targets. With Rome Odunze as the established number one, Thomas entering with hunger and elite speed, Loveland consuming middle field space, and Swift and Monangai out of the backfield, Burden has to share the ball with a lot of hungry mouths. What Johnson is building here is the defense can't cover everybody philosophy. There's no classic WR1 getting 20 targets a week. There are 6 or 8 weapons who are all real threats, and the quarterback reads the coverage and finds whoever is most open. That's good for the team. But for Burden specifically, it means his statistical production will probably not fully reflect his quality as a player. And yet, and here's what genuinely excites me. Johnson said something that makes me think Burden is going to have more freedom within the system this year. The question was, how can we get it in his hands? The easy things are screens or short throws. But there is a lot more to his game that we've worked to unlock. Unlock. That word. That implies Johnson has routes designed specifically for Burden that in year 1 couldn't be executed because Burden didn't yet have the technical confidence to run them. Now he does. And if that means Burden in year 2 is aligned in different positions in the formation, running different types of routes, being a threat in situations that last year were exclusively territory for other receivers, that is a different weapon, more complete, more dangerous. DeAndre Swift watched this kid every single day last season and said it plainly this week. Got a young man that's hungry, that knows his ability, confident. Because every day he goes to work, he knows his ability and it shows. I sensed that hunger last year when he first walked in the building. And Burden himself, when asked who says he's that guy, answered without hesitation, I'm that guy. Look, in May, that phrase can sound like locker room bravado. But when you combine it with a specific and technical praise from Johnson, with the offseason work context, with a developmental jump that the entire organization is describing consistently, it starts to look less like bravado and more like confidence built on real work. If Luther Burden III has the season that Ben Johnson seems to be predicting, the conversation about him in Chicago is going to change dramatically. He's not going to be the second-round pick who was solid in his rookie year. He's going to be the number 2 on this offense who is making NFC North corners' lives miserable. And fam, that is exactly what these Bears need. And here we arrive at the question nobody wants to ask, but that ESPN already put on the table this week. Could the Bears trade Cole Kmet? The ESPN trade simulation included Kmet alongside other veterans like Keon Coleman from Buffalo, Anthony Richardson from Indianapolis, and Kayvon Thibodeau from the Giants. All players with contracts in situations that make their teams potentially willing to listen to trade offers. And I'm going to be direct with my opinion here because I think there's a real conversation to have. First, the context. Kmet is a veteran tight end. He has been a solid TE for years in Chicago. Not spectacular, not the Pro Bowl caliber player some fans expected when he was drafted, but reliable, smart within the system, and a functional blocker in the run game. He has had 700-yard seasons. He knows the system. Quarterbacks trust him on third down situations. But the reality of the Bears roster in 2026 is this. Colston Loveland arrived last year and immediately showed he is the future at that position. He is more athletic than Kmet. He has a better receiver profile, and he has the ability to be a mismatched nightmare in the middle field for the next 10 years. And on top of that, the Bears used a pick on Sam Roush from Stanford in this year's draft, adding another piece to the tight end room. How many tight ends does this team need on the active roster? 2 in most formations. And if Loveland is the undisputed number 1 and Roush is the development project for the future, where exactly does Kmet fit? The honest answer is, in a position where his external market value probably exceeds his internal utility for the Bears right now. And that is something Ryan Poles, who has shown he is a general manager willing to make unpopular moves when they make sense for the team, has to seriously evaluate. My direct critical opinion, I think Poles should listen to offers for Kmet if the price is a second-round pick or better, or if there is a quality edge rusher on the other side of the trade. The Bears' pass rush line is still an area where this team can improve. And if Kmet can bring that kind of resource back, the decision makes itself from a roster-building perspective. The argument against, and I want to be fair to it, is that continuity matters in Ben Johnson's system. Kmet knows the offense. He knows the splits, the alignments, the route options. That has real value, especially on a team that is trying to go deep in the playoffs. Cutting or trading away that experience has a real cost, particularly in critical weeks of the regular season when third down tight end plays are the difference between winning and losing. But here is my counter-argument. Loveland was in this system last year. He learned it too. And if Poles can reinforce the pass rush with the asset that is Kmet, that trade makes this team better on a net basis. There's no perfect trade. But in the calculation of where these Bears need to improve to be a serious contender in 2026, more pressure on the opposing quarterback is more valuable than the third tight end. And while that market drama plays out, there's an undrafted free agent who is fighting to earn his place on this roster in a much more modest and much more admirable way. Omari Kelly, wide receiver from Michigan State, signed with the Bears after going undrafted. He arrives with 626 yards in his senior season, 47 receptions, 2 touchdowns. Those aren't spectacular numbers. They're the numbers of a reliable receiver in a first-tier college program who knows what to do on every play. What makes Kelly specifically interesting for the Bears? 2 things. The first is his reliability as a timing route receiver. He doesn't have elite speed. He doesn't have extraordinary size. But he has clean hands, he understands how to work against zone coverages, and in Johnson's system, which depends on every player on the field executing their route responsibility with precision so the quarterback's reads work, a reliable receiver has real value. The second, and perhaps more important, punt returns. 12 returns in 2025 for 150 yards, with a 12.5 average per return. In special teams, that number isn't elite, but it's perfectly competent. And the Bears, with the addition of Khalif Raymond as a veteran experienced in special teams, have a special teams group profile that can use a depth receiver who also contributes in punt returns. Does Kelly make the 53? In my honest opinion, it's very difficult. The 4th receiver spot is being contested by Jade Walker. Thomas is already working with the first team, and Raymond is practically untouchable given what he brings on special teams. The realistic path for Kelly is the practice squad. Arrive at the first preseason game, make enough plays for the team to want to keep him in the organization, and wait for his opportunity if someone goes down injured. But there is something I like about the fact that the Bears went after Kelly specifically. The undrafted free agents, team recruits, say something about the coaching staff's philosophy. Johnson wants receivers who understand routes, who are reliable, and who contribute on special teams. Kelly fits that profile. And in an offseason where the focus has been on building real depth in the receiver room, having Kelly in camp competing raises the overall level for everyone else. That has value even if he doesn't make the roster. So here is where we stand in the Windy City. Xavier Thomas walked into Hollis Hall, and in his first week, he's already making Tyreek Stevenson look human. Luther Burden is converting off-season work into the kind of developmental leap that Ben Johnson is praising publicly, and that doesn't happen for just anybody. And there are market questions around Cole Kmet that are going to keep circulating as the summer moves forward, questions that Ryan Poles is eventually going to have to answer out loud. And fam, we are in May. OTAs are just the appetizer. Training camp is coming. Preseason is coming. The entire story this team still has to write is coming. I'm going to be here covering every rep, every Poles decision, every Williams throw, because these 2026 Chicago Bears have something this franchise hasn't had in a long time, the genuine feeling that the ceiling is high. And I want to be right here when we reach it. If this has you as fired up as it has me, drop your like right now and tell me down in the comments. Does Xavier Thomas make the 53-man roster and have real offensive impact in year one, or does he need more time? I already know my answer. Bear down, Navy and Orange, always.